Boom, there it is. All right, ladies and gents, welcome to another episode. We're live in the Business Bros classroom. Say what's up, class. Very exciting, I can tell. All right, let's talk about brewing some burr here. I know there's 17-year-olds in this classroom, but hey, a business is a business, so let's jump into it. Here we go.
Shut up and sit down.
Look, a business can give you everything you want in life. Prestige, wealth, freedom. It can also take everything away from you. This show is for those who are willing to take that risk. These are the real life stories of entrepreneurs. But before we start, I have one small favor to ask. Please leave a comment. It can be advice, critiques, tips, feedback, or share this with someone because your engagement is the most valuable and most powerful form of social currency. So thank you, and welcome to another episode of Business Bros. All right, let's do this. Don't ever let anyone or anything stop you from achieving your dreams. Our guest today had a dream of opening a brewery and full kitchen restaurant. Obstacle after obstacle got in his way, but eventually they found a place to start their brewery in October of 2009. But that was just the beginning. They had to renovate before they actually started brewing, continue renovations, and wait almost 3 years before they finally had their dream become a reality. Now they got a great selection of beer. They won many awards and brought pride back to their Riverside village. I can't wait to hear all about this entrepreneurial journey. So let's welcome to the show from CrossRoads Brewing Company, Mr. Ken Landin. All right, Ken, welcome to the program, man.
Wow, look at that intro, man. That's one of the best intros I've had, man. That's awesome. I love it. Thank you for the kind words as well.
Of course. And I guess we should say it's really nice considering you're a Jets fan, but we won't hold it against you, man. We won't hold it against you.
Hey, I've been suffering for a lot of years, man, so I'm used to it. I'm also a Met fan, and I know that's not going to go over too well with your class back there either.
Nah, they're ready to cheer the Padres against the Phillies today. So let's see how things go.
I love it. I love it.
Unbelievable, because I'm a Dodger fan and they beat the Dodgers. So I get some hate over here too as well. Don't worry.
Right on, man. It's all good, man. That's what makes the world go round, right? We got to have fun. We got to have something to root for. We got to something to look forward to. And I dig it, man. I really do dig it.
100%. All right, man. Let's talk about this. In your intro, we talked about how you got a spot in 2009. You had to wait 3 years to make this thing become a reality. So before we even get into that story, before we get into 2009, you got an audience of high school students. So I want to ask you, first and foremost, because I asked this of all the entrepreneurs that come on the show, what kind of high school student were you? And did you know what you were going to do when you graduated?
No, I was awful. I was an awful high school student. I'm sorry. But one of the things that really kind of like rescued me and saved my life, and I would like to advocate this to a lot of your students there now, is I was a tradesman first. I had a drywall company. I was a sheetrock and taper, and I learned how to do that when I was about 14, 15 years old. And I learned a very good work ethic and the value of $1 very early, and that kept me out of trouble. Now, I'm not going to go out on a limb and say being 16, 17 years old with a pocket full of money was beneficial, but it taught me a lot of things, how to manage money, how to understand the power of money. And I was lucky. I didn't go to college. I barely graduated high school, but what I had was a trade, and I took that with me till this very day. I still utilize that trade. So I would like to advocate for any of the kids sitting in there and make them understand, like in another 3-4 years, there's not going to be anyone to do any kind of trades work, electrician, plumber, foundation work, builders, tapers, sheetrockers, plasterers. So that's one thing that I think that kids should really be looking at, where once back when I was doing it, it was frowned upon. It was like, hey, you're waiting on a coffee line and you fill it dirt and dust and whatnot. People are looking at you like, look at this schlep, you know what? But now people are starting to realize, like, hey, man, these people are valuable. Like, our tradesmen are valuable. And now we're starting to actually get recognized, and we're able to go out and charge a decent wage. But with that, we're helping people as well, right? We're helping people who can't find tradesmen to do things. So it's a win-win, I think, for the tradesmen in there. And that's like, I'd like to start with that first and foremost, to let the kids know, man, like, hey, you could do extremely financially well in the trades these days. So
let me ask you about that, the education, because it's a little bit different, right? Like you were saying, when you were growing up, same when I was growing up, it was all about go to school, go to college, work with your mind, right? But not everybody's designed to work with their mind. As a matter of fact, I get a lot of students who I try to get them to focus for like 5 minutes, and that is a difficult task in and of itself. But working with your hands is a little bit different. It's still an education that you have to go through, but it's not necessarily difficult because your mind works a little bit differently, right? I mean, you still spend a lot of time learning, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's definitely, what you really do learn is like the skill, you learn the skill, you hone the skill in. But what you keep learning and understanding is dealing with people, because you're constantly dealing with people, and you have to really educate and learn and get your people skills in check. And, I went into, I learned as an apprentice in my teens, and then I went into the union, and then I ran my own drywall company for about 25 years, and then decided at the age 45 that I was getting into the beer industry for the passion of it. But little did I know that all of those years that I worked in the drywall industry was really grooming me to continue my learning to work with people, because as you know, the service industry, the hospitality industry, that's just, it's a people person industry, high volume. So, I also learned like how to deal with, the customer that was upset, or I had to deal with my staff, my average age of, 23, 24 years old. So now I'm learning all of those kind of like people skills. So it's been interesting. It's been definitely interesting.
I'm going to ask you about that young staff, because I know there's a lot of these guys that are looking for work, and sometimes working at a brewery like that makes a lot of sense. Like it totally works for part-time jobs, startup jobs, and stuff like that. But let's talk about the beer life. So You said at about 45, you decided to go into this new industry. So in other words, you're almost taking a leap of faith. It's a completely different industry. It's not drywall anymore. It's not construction. It's still sales, but a completely different industry. What in your right mind thought, hey, I'm going to go into the beer space and be successful? How does that work? How do you get yourself to do that, take that leap?
Yeah, I mean, I had a passion for it. And this is going back in the early, late 1900s, if you will, early 2000. You say that and it seems like forever ago, but for me, it's like just like yesterday. But I had a passion for it. So what I did was while I ran my drywall company, I learned the beer industry for free. I worked for a brewery. I became a salesperson for the brewery. I became a brew rep eventually with that brewery for about 5 years. And I didn't earn a dollar. I didn't make any, monetary value. There was nothing. All I was doing was creating a foundation and learning about the industry, which I knew that I was planting those seeds eventually for the business that I wanted to grow. Right. And that what I see as an issue a lot of times these days is the kids they want it fast. I want it now. I want it now. I want it now. You need to build that foundation and plant those seeds for your future. You need to look further out and then work backwards, right? So I was doing the drywall for 25, 30 years, and I was getting a little physically burnt out. I wanted to try something new, and I knew that was the way the route I was going to go. But it took, I wrote the business plan in 2002, 2003. We didn't open until 2009. It took that long to learn the industry and to purchase a building and get the restaurant and the brew pub up and running. And, it's, what everybody sees is, they see the duck above the water. They don't see the paddling below the water, right? You don't see the work that goes on. They want to count your money. The place is filled. Man, it took me 30 years to get there. It's a lot of freaking work. And that's one of the things I advocate too, is like you got to be willing to put the work in, man. Like it doesn't happen overnight. And I tell my staff that now. I'm like, guys, I understand like this is a stepping stone for you, but you're planting the seeds for your future. And the decisions that you make today, I don't care if it's 5 years, 10 years, they will come back, and you will have that aha moment when I say, that decision I made, if you handle yourself with integrity now, it's going to stay with you into the future. At least I believe that, So
don't ever let somebody tell you can't do something.
Exactly, Will. Don't ever let anybody tell you can't do nothing. All right, let's talk about choosing a brew style. So I watched this show called Undercover Billionaire, right? And in it, the guy is basically, he's dropped in the middle of some town nowhere. He's given $100 and then he's got 90 days to make $1 million.
Mhm.
One of the things he ends up essentially opening a restaurant, and he goes through this whole thing about branding or rebranding a beer because he obviously couldn't start from scratch. When you got into the beer business, what can you explain to me how you choose a brew? Did you go with like your own label, or did you end up white labeling somebody else's?
No, so, and I like Grant Cardone, so that was a good show. But
It was actually the season right before his.
was it before his?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
knew it sounded familiar. So what I did was I had a love of brewing, and I homebrewed. We homebrewed in a garage in Queens. That's where I'm born and raised, in Queens, New York. And we homebrewed, when everybody was hanging out, and we were chipping in for ingredients, and we brewed beer. And there was a couple of styles that we gravitated to, and really honed in those skills. So when I eventually opened up the own brewery, I just took one of those original recipes and just kind of scaled it up and reformulated it. And that's that. At the time in 2008, it was a style. 2009, it was a style that was kind of underrepresented. It's called our flagship beer is called it's a West Coast style IPA. It's Outrage IPA. It was like really underrepresented on the East Coast, and I was like, hey, you know what? Let's come out of the gate with this. It's a stronger IPA, higher IBUs. It's a flavor and a profile that not many people have seen around here, and till this day, it's still our number one seller. So,
Oh, you're right. And when you're right, you're right. And you're always right.
You were right. You picked the IPA and it worked out. Let's talk about startup capital. So you were in the drywall business. The restaurant industry is notorious for having such a large startup capital rate with a low success rate. How did you kind of mitigate that? How did you decide that you were going to fund this thing and then kind of secure your success? I mean, again, starting a restaurant is super expensive. Starting a brewery, it's a lot of equipment you got to get involved up front. How'd you fund it? How'd it go?
yeah. So you're taking me back to the scariest moments of the entrepreneurial journey. So when I relocated from Queens to upstate New York, I sold everything. I mean, I was all in. I sold my house. I sold all my investments. Not that there was, it wasn't millions, but it was a lot to me at the time. I cashed in all my life insurance. I maxed out my credit cards. I borrowed from friends. I put myself out there, and I literally went to closing on the building. One thing that I had learned early, and a mentor of mine told me very, very young: you want to own the real estate. You don't want to be a slave to a landlord. You want to own the real estate. So I had that in my head, like planted in my head. Somehow, some way, you have to buy this real estate. And that's what I did. I was just dead set on buying the real estate. So I raised enough money to buy the building. I actually sat at the closing table with the financial institution that I worked with 70 cents in my bank account. I can remember it very vividly.
Ooh.
And I knew that I was going to live off some of the money that I was borrowing, as well as grow, renovate the building and work on the business. But now don't forget, like I alluded to in the beginning, I had a trade behind me. So I was able to side hustle and still do some taping and drywall work while I was trying to open up this business, just to keep some cash flow and money coming into my pocket. So it became, now I'm, now it's burnout mode, right? It's 15, 16 hours a day. But with that building, it was a historic building. It was built in 1893. We were able to qualify for some historical grants, and we were also able to tap into some government money, which was based off job creation. At the time, it was called the Quantum Fund. It was based off of creating jobs, and we were able to secure loans that way. And we became very, very creative. And I went from the drywall industry with no college education, 2 feet in, like jumping in, and I had to learn, man. I learned every single day. It was a freaking battle. And, with no money in the beginning, man, it was scary. And then, selling everything, and it was an interesting journey for sure. Scary,
Man,
very scary.
Yeah, I mean, not having cash, not being able to survive, taking that leap of faith. I mean, you literally believed in yourself. This is either a passion or you were completely insane. One or the other was gonna take hold. So, I mean, in any business, right? Part of it is passion, and I always hear this double-sided thing, right? Where on the one hand, don't chase the money because it's not the end result that you're after. You're not going to be successful. Focus on your customer service, focus on your product, focus on your passion, and the money will follow. But let's be honest, man, when you get into business,
We're not just doing this for money. We're doing it for a shitload of money.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the case, right? That's really the case. So how does one take a home brew and scale it so that you are making that kind of money?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. I mean, going back to what you said, I got a lot of that. Is he that smart or is he that stupid? But you know, it was just it was different back then. The you know, when I left Long Island in Queens, there was 4 breweries. That was in 2008, 2009. There's 78 breweries there now. And, when I was doing it, nobody knew what we were doing. I had to actually educate and convince the little village and the county. And then, uh, the feds, and when I was dealing with all of these, government agencies, like what we were doing because it was so new. So, I think it was just growing it organic and just being ourselves and just creating a kind of like a code of ethics and just what we believed in, and we wanted to just build a place. We first and foremost we wanted to renovate an old, dilapidating, once crown jewel of the village, bring it back to life. And we also wanted to take pride in the little village and bring commerce into the village and make a change, and one pint at a time. And that was the goal, really. Like, we can make a difference doing this. And, one of it's funny that you should say that. I learned it like later on, well, probably too late. Like, business is business, fun is fun. And you want to make money, and eventually you have to make money because your passion is not going to pay your bills. But if you truly believe in something and you truly enjoy something, it makes it a lot easier to go to that home office or building or wherever the place may be to work. And for me, that was the key. I wanted to be able to go somewhere where I enjoyed it, and to grow the business and to make a difference in the little village, which we did. I mean, we honestly did. We changed that village till this day. The restaurant brew pub's still open. It'll be 13 or 14 years. We're still going. And we put that village on the map. And at the end of the day, what's better than that? If you can make a difference in this world and do good things, like, to me, that's win-win.
Yeah. I mean, and for you, hospitality business, I'm sure you kind of remember the Cheers days, right? So you're over here trying to remember everybody's name, having those regular customers come in.
Yes.
But from the time 2009 to when you actually opened the business, I mean, that was 3 years time. So I'm sure you were like stressed out, right? You were
Today, Junior.
You wanted
Today,
it done
Junior.
today, right? You wanted
Today,
it done as fast as possible. How do you handle that pressure of, I want it done now? I want to open yesterday, and I still got hurdle after hurdle in front of me before I open it. What kind of stuff did you have to go through? Why did it take 3 years?
So going back to how it actually went down, Hernan, was so we bought the building in 2008. We opened a little tasting room in 2009. Okay, within the facilities. We didn't have the kitchen built. We didn't have the bar built. So we didn't have that revenue coming in. We opened a little tasting room, and we had to give out the laws. We couldn't sell. We had to give out free beer. Then we could turn around and sell beer in growlers. And that's how we created our revenue. So we literally lived off of the money that we had borrowed and this little revenue that we created out of our little tap room and small distribution. And that's what funded the business at that time. We eventually, a year later, we opened the bar. And a year after that, we opened the kitchen. So, it was getting to those milestones was the goal. And we knew that if we could survive with as minimal amount of revenue coming in as we had coming in, we knew that if we got to the next threshold, that would only increase our revenue and give us a better chance of success. But it was a battle along the way. Laws were changing. SLA was involved. TTB is involved. The government's your partner. You're paying sales tax. And these are all things that should be taught earlier in age. But the hurdles, it was one hurdle after hurdle after hurdle after hurdle. And, without perseverance and without a high threshold for stress, entrepreneurship looks great from the outside, man, but you better have a stomach of steel. And it's, what you see outside looking in is not always the case, but I can remember sitting in the delivery van that I used to drive myself and drive every single keg around and deliver it, self-distribute. I was on the phone with the TTB, which is the Tax and Trade Bureau, federally regulating, that had no idea what we were doing. I was on the phone for 4 hours sitting in the van, like talking to them, because I didn't have an office, and I look back at those days, and now, it's a lot different now. You can open up with no food and all of those things, but there was definitely more sleepless nights than good night sleeps. I can tell you that much. It's being honest.
You opened, so eventually you got the bar open, then you got the kitchen in. Now you're rocking and rolling. And I told you I was going to come back and ask you about young staff. That's a whole other hurdle, right? Getting the building, hurdle number one, getting the licenses to be able to sell, hurdle number two, opening the kitchen. Now you got to manage something. You had a background in drywall, which I'm assuming you either had to deal with contractors, subcontractors, or employees. So
Yes.
You had some experience there. But how does that differ from, in that case, you don't really have to those people are not really dealing with customers. They're dealing with equipment. They're doing stuff. Now you're managing people that are front facing with the customer, people that customers aren't always the nicest. They say some stuff sometimes. And how do you manage people in such an environment, especially when alcohol is involved, to keep that good face on and do a good job?
Man, I'll tell you, that's a great question. How I did it, I really don't know. I always had an attribute of performing very well under chaos, and I think that on the outside I remained very calm, but on the inside it was a freaking shit show, And I always said, I old commercial, never let them see you sweat, But here I am thrown into a people business where I had staff, but just exactly like you said, my staff, my drywall company, we didn't interact with customers. I was the only one who interacted with homeowners or contractors. They were out of the picture. Now we're dealing with every customer that walks through the door. Your burger is overcooked. Your beer doesn't taste good. The second night in business, very second night, like we had no clue what we were doing. Not a clue. We were still writing tickets out on pads with pencils and running them to the kitchen. I had a guy stand up and he was this close to my nose and he was screaming at me. I mean, literally on the top of his lungs. You have no effing idea what you're doing. You should not be in this business. And I was like,
Oh, hell no.
And the
That's
queen,
what you were like.
it was like the queens in me wanted to throw him through the window, but also I realized that I had 20 people there. The dining room was all looking at me. How is this guy going to handle this? And I never forget it. And I just, calmly, I turned around and I asked the gentleman to leave. But that was my first learning experience. And that wasn't the last one, but you have to become an extremely and I was always a good judge of character, and sometimes it bites you in the ass when you don't read it right, or you don't read the room right, or you don't handle it. But I became a very good judge of character very, very well, and I was quick at diffusing situations. But dealing with a younger staff, it was very hard to me being older to get on the same playing field. It was how do I relate to these kids? How do I teach them to be professional with customer service. And it was a tough battle because some of the kids are they have trouble being social to begin with. So now we put training in. Everyone had to be trained specifically. Eye contact. How do you speak to someone? Make sure you acknowledge them. You're polite. You say thank you. You introduce yourself. You smile. All of those things that everybody should be doing on a day-to-day
Just
basis.
smile and wave, boys. Smile and wave.
Yes, exactly.
But it's hard. It's hard to do that. And thank goodness that in the beginning, when we first opened, we did hire some people with experience that helped us. We're in the industry, had way more experience than I did. I'll be the first. I'll take full accountability, man. I didn't know shit. I was just like, yeah, I just want to make beer for a living, man. I don't want a restaurant. But back then, the laws were different. We had to have a restaurant in order to sell alcohol. So we were forced into the restaurant industry, which I had no desire to be in, but now I found myself in there, and it was a challenge, man. There was many nights I just sat there and I was just like, what the hell am I doing?
Hey man, but I'll be honest, dude. These kids just came from homecoming and they went, took their dates out and had dinners. Unfortunately, they're not old enough to be in a brewery, but in my opinion, breweries have the best food. The burgers, the fried, like almost anything in a brewery always tastes better. Maybe it is because of the alcohol. I don't know. We'll go with that, but it is definitely always good to have some of that great food there. What is something that young people should know if they're applying for a job in the hospitality space after you've been in this space for a while? Like, what advice would you give to them when applying, when interviewing, maybe even when doing the job?
Show up. Number one, man. If you show up, I can teach you. If you don't show up, I can't teach you. You have to show up. And that just shows if I learned a lot of things. If you don't respect the time, you don't respect the person. And especially in a job, you have to take responsibility. And how do you shine? You be yourself. And, being a good judge of character, you could usually pick those things out. And I would be the first to say, hey, I'm going to work side by side with you. I don't care if it's sweeping the floors, washing the dishes. That's how I did it. And I gained respect from a lot of my staff in the very, very beginning because they said, hey, this is the owner of the company and he's down on the floor scrubbing with me and he's cleaning the grease trap and he's taking the garbage out. But that builds character and that builds trust and that builds, camaraderie between all of us. But for someone right now, showing up is the biggest thing. I can't get anybody to show up, consistently. That one of the things that I always try and talk about is consistency, communication, and accountability. And if you can consistently show up, I'm not a mind reader, right? You have to communicate with me. We have to talk. We have to know what's going on. And I don't mean to get into your personal life, but I also want to be, have some empathy to the fact that people do have things going on in their lives. And how can I help? And if I can help, what can I do? And then if something gets screwed up and something goes down, you have to take accountability for it, and just like I have to take accountability, if one of my staff members came in and their check wasn't there and I just walked away and I was just like, yeah, you know what? I fell asleep. I'm taking accountability. How do they look at me as a leader? So, the three key things, I think, when you're really, maybe four things, showing up is the biggest thing for me, but consistency, communication, and accountability. If you can muster up those attributes, you have an incredible, you put yourself so much higher on that level of success, and you don't even realize it because a lot of people can't do it. They just can't. So it's
do or do not. There is no try.
Yoda, the mentor, said it best, right? Show up, just do it. Nike has the greatest slogan of all time, in my opinion. Just do it. There's no such thing as perfection, only progress. You're gonna get better over time if you show up and consistently do it. The first time you play Monopoly, you suck. The second time you play Monopoly, you have a chance of winning, and the only difference is you know the rules, right? So that's what it comes down to. Show up, play the game, see what happens. Ken, you've been a great guest, dropping some pearls of wisdom. I'm so glad that you were able to share your experiences, the ups and the downs. Before we head out, any final thoughts? And if people want to work with you, reach out to you, or stop by one of your breweries at some point, how do they do that?
Yeah, man. We're in Catskill. We're in upstate New York. We're about 2 hours from Manhattan. You can take a train ride up. You can come over and see us in the production facility. We have a nice tap room. I'm most active on LinkedIn. You just punch my name in, Ken Landin. I like that platform. It's I've met a lot of great people on there. If anybody ever wants to chat, questions or whatever, LinkedIn is the best way to get a hold of me. My email is there as well. But I'm always open to. I get a lot of people that do reach out and ask questions. I try and just wear it on my sleeve, man, and tell it how it is. I grew up in Queens, and that's how we do it.
Straight up, right? No lies, no BS about it. It's just what we do. And he's a New York Jets fan, loyal, even though they've had trashy seasons. Look at him. Now they got a potential to do something this year, and he's still right there, flaunting the jersey. All right, man. Ken, thank you very much, man. Got it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a great episode. Ken, thank you very much for coming on the show. If you guys have any questions, make sure you reach out to Ken. His email is ken@crossroadsbrewingco.com. You can find him on social media at crossroadsbrewing.co or go to the website, trickling across the bottom, crossroadsbrewingco.com. Ladies and gents, we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace. And we're out.
It's over. Go home.
Is your business in need of marketing? Try starting a podcast. But not just any podcast. Podcast like a pro. We can show you how to take your business from being invisible to becoming a brand people trust. Go to www.businessbros.bi